A police officer with first-degree manslaughter. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, co-host of After the Bell on Fox Business, Melissa Francis, Democratic strategist Julie Roginski, and today's #OneLuckyGuy, the executive vice president of development and acquisitions for the Trump Organization and son of presidential candidate Donald Trump. Welcome to Eric Trump. We say you are outnumbered, my dear.
I am outnumbered. There's no question about it.
That's quite
I'm very outnumbered.
Yes. You ready?
Let's have some fun.
Great to have you today.
And a big news day. Glad you're here.
Thank you.
All right, let's begin with that tense situation in Charlotte as pressure mounts for police to release video of the shooting death of Keith Lamont Scott.
The family in this case, who speaks for the victim now, say they want it released. So will you reconsider?
Ultimately, that is a factor in whether or not we release. But ultimately, right now, I don't have any authority to do so. It is in the hands of the State Bureau of Investigations. They're going to do an independent investigation in there. And I tell you, looking at it from all angles, I think that is probably the better option right now.
All right, so you saw those people gathered in the streets, some of them screaming, "We want the tape." You heard the discussion that they were talking about with that, Eric. We're going to first go to our reporter, Rick Leventhal, and then bring it out to the couch. Sure. Rick?
Well, here are some significant updates on this story, thanks to a news conference that just wrapped up minutes ago with the mayor and the police chief, who confirmed that the midnight curfew will remain in effect tonight and likely through the weekend, and also told us that the National Guard and state troopers who were brought in to help out will also likely stay on here, doing a lot of assistance in protecting businesses and property here, as they did successfully overnight last night. And we also learned that there was an arrest at 7 o'clock this morning of the suspect in the murder of Justin Carr, who was shot and killed during those violent protests in the street here on Wednesday night. The chief says surveillance cameras helped identify the suspect and helped ID others who'd been arrested for smashing doors and windows and other crimes against property during the looting and rioting Tuesday and Wednesday. Things were calmer last night. Also late yesterday, the family of Keith Scott was allowed to view the police body cam and dash cam footage of his death when he was shot and killed by a Charlotte police officer Tuesday, which sparked the violent protest. But despite calls from demonstrators and Scott's family, the footage is not being released to the public anytime soon.
I can tell you, one piece of evidence will never, ever make a good case. I know the expectation that video footage can be the panacea, and I can tell you that is not quite the case. There are a lot of other factors that have to support and corroborate even what you might visually see.
Scott's family says you simply can't tell from the video they saw whether or not Scott was armed, and they say that he was not acting in an aggressive manner. But the chief says that Scott was in fact carrying a gun and that his shooting was in fact justified according to his reading of the evidence and watching of the video. Again, last night, Harris, much calmer here in downtown Charlotte, but there were still hundreds of people in the streets, and businesses have been affected. You see the Hyatt Hotel behind me still boarded up. A guy was arrested for kicking in the doors of this hotel, but there are other businesses that remain closed. The midnight curfew, in effect, will affect other businesses. A big concert that was scheduled for tonight has been canceled. But the game, Sunday, the Panthers game against the Vikings, is still on for Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, Rick, and before we let you go, I also caught from the Chiefs news conference a short while ago, Chief Putney, he said that they had gotten confirmation of plans for people to come from outside the state and join on the streets and protest, and that was part of the decision about that curfew last night from midnight to 6 a.m. Rick Leventhal there for us reporting. Thank you very much. As we come out, Eric, I just want to, first of all, get your first initial thoughts on what's playing out here.
Well, it's pain. I mean, it's really, really sad. You see a great city in this country, and I know Charlotte very, very well. I've spent a tremendous amount of time there, and you see the pain, right? On one side, you have the police, and the police are amazing people, and we've gotten to know so many of them on the campaign trail. I mean, they work so hard. They do such a great job, 99.999% of the time. And then you see a community at the same time that's totally in hurt and distraught, and they have something happen. And you ask the question, well, do you release the video? Do you release the video? There's a rule of law, and there's a way that these things are investigated. At the same time, I think people want to know what actually happened, right? And so it's really a balancing act. There's no simple solution. Yeah, just release the video. Well, then how do you get the testimony of all the witnesses without jading the witnesses, right? And do you not release it before doing that? I mean, it really is a balancing act, but people clearly want this to stop because this isn't America, and we're a country that loves each other, and we want unity, and we want peace in this nation, and it's tough to watch, honestly. It's just a tough thing to watch.
That lack of transparency that you're speaking of, though, is so complicated because there's an investigation around this. I will say, Melissa, that it was interesting when you watched the police chief yesterday say that, you know what, he had more questions than answers after watching that video, that it didn't look like he was actually pointing anything at anyone. But it gets complicated from there because even the family admits they have more questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you hear, one of the biggest problems in my mind is that every time I hear somebody talk about the video, I can't picture what's happening in it because the way people talk about it is kind of different, what it shows, what it doesn't show. So that's distressing. It makes you feel like showing it is going to ignite a lot of feelings, but keeping it away is making things worse. I think clearly you talk about the testimony of other people and how it will influence it. That's for sure a question. But in the end, more transparency is better than less.
And that's what people in the streets are calling for. All right, so as everything we're learning, Sandra, has a political side, the protests have become a huge issue now on the campaign trail. Donald Trump is reaching out to black voters, and at the same time, he's denouncing what he calls a narrative of racist policing that has taken hold in the wake of deadly officer-involved shootings of black men. He also raised the issue of reviving stop-and-frisk policies, at least in Chicago, where we have seen an enormous amount of crime in terms of shootings. At a rally in Pennsylvania, he slammed Hillary Clinton and said she's at least partly to blame for the unrest in cities like Charlotte. Watch.
Those peddling the narrative of cops as a racist force in our society, and this is a narrative that is supported. They nod by my opponent. You see what she's saying, and it's not good. Shared directly in the responsibility for the unrest that is afflicting our country and hurting those who have really the very least, people that are having a hard time.
Earlier in the day, Trump also appeared to blame drugs for the unrest as well as President Obama's policies. And while she was absent again from the campaign trail twice this week, that happened yesterday, Clinton on Wednesday seemed to be trying to appease two sides in the fray.
We have two more names to add to a list of African Americans killed by police officers in these encounters. It's unbearable, and it needs to become intolerable. Every day, police officers across our country are serving with extraordinary courage, honor, and skill. We are safer when communities respect the police and police respect communities.
Oh, the perils of political dancing.
Well, it's quite clear by watching both candidates' response that this has affected this campaign. And it's brought up extremely important points and issues that this country continues to face. But as I was watching that, I thought it was so neat to watch you, Eric, watching your father, and I think you're probably doing a whole lot of that these days. But that being said, do you talk to him when we saw these shootings happen and we continue to see the unrest in Charlotte? How much do you talk to your father about that and get his ideas on this?
Listen, a lot. I mean, we speak to him a lot. The reality is there's about 1.2 million law enforcement officers in this country. And every day they do a great, great job for the citizens of this nation. There's just no question about it. I mean, there's not a day that you can't see a cop taking a fallen law enforcement officer's child to school because their father or their mother was killed in some shooting by some criminal. I mean, they just do amazing things. They're amazing people. They do so much charitable work. I mean, they keep law and order in this society. Once in a while you have bad apple, right? I don't think anybody cannot acknowledge that happens. Once in a while you also have a mistake that happens, and there's no one that can't acknowledge that happens. But by and large, they're amazing people. If you were to take Wall Street and you were to put them in blue uniforms, I can tell you the problem would be substantially worse. I mean, they really are good people. And I think my father's point is we have to support law enforcement. We have to support law enforcement. At the same time, Hillary has been totally absent from so many of these communities. I mean, my father's been going into Center City, Detroit, and speaking to the African American community. I mean, so many of these communities have been totally left behind. And I'm not just saying Republican versus Democrat here. I'm just saying by past administrations for the last 30, 50, 100 years, these communities have been totally left behind. It's why in certain cities you have 60% African-American youth who are unemployed. It's why you have to walk through 3 metal detectors and to walk into some of these schools. And it's just a very, very sad thing.
You raise an interesting point, but let me read you a quote that your father's running mate gave just a few days ago. And this is the quote from Mike Pence, your vice presidential candidate. Donald Trump and I both believe there's been far too much talk of institutional bias and racism in law enforcement. Does your father really believe that? Because I'm going to give you a statistic. Vox analyzed FBI data from 2012. 31% of police killings were of black people, who only comprise 13% of the population. Based on that data, and I know you're a data guy because of what you do for a living, Is there really too much talk of institutional bias and racism when we see an unarmed man being shot just this week, the police officer charged with manslaughter as a result of that shooting? After that, and after the data that I just read to you, really, can you stand here and say, and your father...
Listen, I'm not a data guy as it pertains to shootings.
Well, this is data I'm reading to you.
It's obviously not what I do.
But do you stand by what Mike Pence said?
You see that one shooting in Oklahoma, and there was nothing good about that shooting in Oklahoma. It looked like the officer choked or something. Who knows what happened there? That clearly didn't look like a good shooting. I don't think anybody's going to say that's a good shooting, and that's why that person's obviously, charged with that. I think the point that's being made is all too often the first line of narrative to come to, and it's been used against my father for months and months and months, is you say anything. You go into you're not in an African-American community, and you're racist for not being in the African-American community. You go in, and then you give a speech in a African-American church in Detroit, and all of a sudden you're pandering, and now you're racist. And I think all too often what frustrates me as a civilian is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And the narrative coming one way, and it's always come toward the Republicans, is here you are, and you're filled with race, and you're filled with hate, and you're filled with bigotry. And that's simply not the case.
But are we talking about it too much, as Mike Pence suggests? Are we discussing this issue too much?
I think the accusation is thrown toward one side way too often, and I think that's really sad. I think we're people. We're Americans, first and foremost. We have a great country. We have great communities. We should have great schools. We should have great wealth. We should have great jobs.
We're not
and that's really my father's message. Let's put America first again, and let's put all communities first, and let's not leave certain sections of the communities behind.
I would step in with something that people can agree upon, and it's something that you said earlier about the economics of the situation, and that the color is actually green, not brown, not black, not white, and not even blue.
Yeah.
It's green, the economics of it all. And the men in blue, obviously, the men and women in blue who wear that color are often tasked to deal with the issues of poverty like no one else in our communities. One by one, we have to look at these cases, though. The one in Oklahoma is very different from the one in Ferguson, is very different from the one in the Trayvon Martin case, is very different from the one in Charlotte that we just saw. And so to collect the facts and make decisions along the way is important.
And I think responsible decisions, and I think people should have the right to protest if something's bad and there was an injustice that was done. I think where I draw the line personally, and again, I'm not a politician, but where I draw the line is when you see the violence and you see windows being broken and when you see chaos in the streets.
Well, that's lawlessness. That's not
But talking about it is a good thing, I think, and it raises awareness, and I don't like to hear that people think we shouldn't talk about this anymore.
We'll move on. A stunning new twist in the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Fox News has confirmed new information that the FBI has granted immunity to Clinton's top aide Cheryl Mills and 2 other staff members in addition to the 3 we already knew about. Raising more questions about how do you really prosecute when everybody's been given immunity? I want to know that. Plus, the stakes are high. Just 3 days from the first presidential debate, we'll talk about the gender factor in the showdown. Is there one? Some experts say Donald Trump has to walk a fine line in how he goes after a female candidate. But she says she wants equality. We'll debate it.
A Fox News alert for you. Fox News confirming that Hillary Clinton's former chief of staff, Cheryl Mills, and 2 other staff members were granted immunity in exchange for their cooperation in the now closed FBI investigation into Clinton's use of a private email server as Secretary of State. House Oversight Committee Chairman Jason Chaffetz telling the Associated Press, quote, "No wonder they couldn't prosecute a case. They were handing out immunity deals like candy." The 3 cases of immunity are in addition to the 2 others that we already knew about, including the IT guy who set up the homebrew servers. An unbelievable story that continues to make news. Eric Trump is on the couch with us right now. Your take on this story as we continue to learn more about it?
I think it's why my generation has lost faith in politicians, until quite frankly now. Honestly, it's so disturbing, right? When you're lying to the Department of Justice, when you're lying to Congress, when you're lying to the FBI, when you lie to the American people, you lie under oath. Nothing happens about it. You have these secret meetings with Loretta Lynch and Bill Clinton in planes on random runways in the middle of nowhere. Then people aren't even showing up in front of Congress to testify. Then they're all pleading the fifth, the very few people who do.
Yeah.
I mean, you're sitting there saying this is a circus. This is a joke. I mean, this isn't America. And I mean, it's got to cross lines. At some point, we've got to be partisan enough in this country where we say, no, this is evasion of justice. This is bad stuff. I mean, this is really bad stuff. She was Secretary of State. She deleted 15,000 emails after Congress said, you're not allowed to delete emails. Like, preserve your emails, retain your emails. And I don't know. I look at my generation. I'm kind of right on the border of being a millennial, but there's no one in my generation who wants to go into politics. I mean, no one I know, and this is the reason why. I mean, this is the reason why, and we have so little faith in our politicians, and again, this is the reason why.
I'm curious behind the scenes with the campaign. I mean, obviously the whole country has said one way or the other if the email scandal matters to them, but the trustworthiness factor has been an issue, and I'm curious, behind the scenes, is that something that is being talked about? Is it the email server, or what? How exactly are you categorizing what's happening in the news with this?
Well, listen, I think it's everything. I think it's server. I think it's the fact that the server was in a bathroom in somebody's home. I mean, this is Secretary of State. I mean, this is real stuff. This isn't, this isn't like a little petty position. I mean, this is real stuff.
Just to give some perspective on this, I want to get Julie in here. Our own James Rosen reporting, we can't confirm this, but that Loretta Lynch and James Comey are probably the first federal investigators to confer immunity on the chief of staff of a major politician and not prosecute the said politician.
Well, and I find it interesting that the reason you give immunity to somebody is that they give you honest and truthful testimony. And if they still, after providing immunity to her staff and to her chief of staff, had nothing enough on her, in their opinion, to charge her, maybe there ain't a lot there. And that's something that Jason Chaffetz, who sat on this very couch, on this very spot, Eric, and said that he was going to take Jim Comey's word for it on Outnumbered. And then, of course, when Jim Comey didn't give him the result that he wanted, turned right around and started trashing the same Jim Comey he'd been praising before as an honest and upright law enforcement officer. Maybe Jason Chaffetz knows as well as I do, and anybody does, that if you provide immunity for people in exchange for truthful testimony, and they still aren't able to help your case, there ain't much of a case.
Can I say that? I was very surprised that you can be commanded by Congress to come before Congress and you don't show up and there's no recourse. And you're talking about this idea that they were told they were not allowed to destroy emails by Congress, they had to produce them, they didn't, and there was no recourse for that. Like, how is there no teeth?
Well, part of the thing with Pagliano that they offered up in lieu of him actually going before Congress, and maybe this was a good around or maybe not, but it answers to your question, they offered him a private session, right? So he had the choice to go to the Hill or the private session. The question is, has said private session happened? But I want to say this to you, Eric. This is from our Judge Napolitano, who's one of our Fox News contributors here, a legal analyst, a genius in some ways, I would say. Only a federal judge can sign an order of immunity at DOJ's request, and only for the purpose of compelling testimony to a grand jury or a trial jury, neither of which existed in this case.
Listen, we're getting too micro, in my opinion. Look at the macro. I had one cell phone. No, I had 4 cell phones. I wanted to carry one around because of convenience. No, I want to carry 4. I didn't delete any emails. I didn't delete any top secret emails. Well, they weren't marked classified. I mean, at every turn of this whole thing, that there was a lie on one side or the other. So forget about the legal minutia. Forget about the legal garbage. I mean, the reality is you put the clips up there. You put what Comey said up there, that she was incredibly careless. She was totally reckless. It could have compromised national security.
Lied.
It's just bad stuff. I mean, just forget about the nonsense. It's just bad stuff. It doesn't...
By the way, going back to your comment, Julie, about Jason Chaffetz saying that he was going to take James Comey at his word, there's stuff that we're still learning now about this investigation that Jason Chaffetz didn't know then.
He didn't qualify.
Like Cheryl Mills was granted immunity.
He didn't. That's my point. Cheryl Mills was granted immunity, and they still didn't have enough to charge Hillary Clinton in Jim Comey's opinion. Had Cheryl Mills not gotten immunity, maybe she wouldn't have been as forthcoming. The assumption for immunity is always that you get immunity in exchange for truthful and honest testimony. She clearly provided that in order to get immunity, and there wasn't enough to charge, and that, I think, is my point.
So much still developing there. A high-stakes showdown with the first presidential debate only 3 days away. Harris is popping her popcorn. Should Donald Trump be careful about walking into the political minefield of sexism? Up next, how gender could play a role on Monday night. Plus, Hillary Clinton feeling the cold shoulder from millennials as Trump trounces her when it comes to social media followers. Is this a sign of a wider enthusiasm gap in this race?
And it's Parmesan on that popcorn.
Well, we are just 3 days now, can you believe it, until the first presidential debate. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are both off the trail today, preparing for the debate. This, as some experts warn, Trump can't risk seeming too aggressive during the debate in light of how gender could play a role. Former New York Senate candidate Rick Lazio is one of those people offering his advice. You may remember when he stepped toward Clinton and wagged his finger during their debate back in 2000. The narrative then became that Lazio had violated her personal space and intimidated a female candidate. And he's now warning Trump to, quote, be aware, there are two debates. The actual debate, then the debate afterwards. The spin. The second is the more important of the two. Julie's nodding her head. Trump, for his part, not revealing his game plan, but here's what he told Bill O'Reilly earlier this week.
People want to see if you, Donald Trump, are going to take Hillary Clinton apart in a very personal way. Are you?
I have absolutely no idea. I think this, if she treats me with respect, I will treat her with respect. It really depends. People ask me that question, oh, you're going to go out there and do this and that. I really don't know that. You're going to have to feel it out when you're out there. But she's got to treat me with respect. I'm going to treat her with respect. And I'd like to start off by saying that because that would be my intention.
All right, so 3 days away, Eric Trump, what is your advice to your father heading into this debate?
Well, I think exactly that. I mean, I do think you have to feel it out. I love how people try and script a debate, 3 weeks before it. I mean, it doesn't really work like that in the real world. Here's the reality. I think my father has to be my father, right? He's not a politician. He's larger than life. He's got great personality.
Does anything
He's a
worry
charismatic
you?
guy. I think you know Hillary for who she is. I'm not saying this out of disrespect, but Hillary's been a career politician. She's been a politician longer than I've been alive. She's memorized every single little line and soundbite that there is. And that's who you're going to hear on that side of the stage. There's no mistaking that, right? I mean, he's a little bit different. He's an
Have you helped him prepare at all?
unscripted guy. He speaks from the heart. And I think, quite frankly, the fact that he's not politically correct is why he's here. People are sick of the usual Washington nonsense, and I think that's why he started the movement that he started.
Harris was offering her help earlier this week. If anybody needed any debate prep, she would be happy to step in.
I like that.
I just did have that conversation. But really interesting when you talk about Hillary Clinton, and she's a career politician. Tim Kaine was sitting down with Katie Couric and said he's worried that expectations had been set unfairly high for Hillary Clinton. Listen to this.
I think maybe we're coming into a place where both candidates ought to be really challenged and challenged the same way. But Donald's been able to get away with some things that Hillary couldn't, and frankly, nobody could. Nobody could get away with not releasing their tax returns in a presidential race.
Melissa says, oh, please.
Oh, please. I mean, it's just funny, so this is the narrative now. They're saying, oh, the bar has been set so low now for Donald Trump. He hasn't have to do anything, and he's going to come out and win, and everybody's expecting so much from Hillary Clinton. Frankly, I think that the gender thing does play a big role. I do think he does need to be careful that I mean, it made me uncomfortable, when you saw in that last debate her being approached there on the screen. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, I think, unfortunately, he does have to be careful. He can look like a bully, especially if he's going after a woman, and that's something that he has. It's not fair. It's not right. But that is the perception.
All right, two things. One, Fox News polling this week found that only 6% of survey respondents even cared about the tax returns. Almost as few cared about her health, which is interesting because in the media, across the board, we're even guilty of it. We spent a lot of time on at least one of those subjects. And now, as it turns out, they care more about other things. The deplorables maybe a little bit. And so we can't really guess what
okay,
matters.
Let's go back to gender in the debate, though. And Julie, do you think Hillary Clinton in her prep right now, her team, are they going to look to make Donald Trump look sexist on that stage?
I think they're going to look, and this is not inside information, so don't read anything into this, but I think they're going to try to pass the commander-in-chief test. Which one of these is the person who you want to be your commander-in-chief? So what they're going to try to do is potentially unnerve your father, to try to make him go off, as he has in a previous debates. You'll concede he wasn't always diplomatic in some of these debates. And so as a result of that, I think what they're going to try to do is make him seem as undiplomatic as possible, so that they'll say this is not somebody who has the temperament to be the next commander-in-chief. That's my supposition. This is no inside information whatsoever. I will also say that Rick Lazio raised such an excellent point. I remember watching that debate in 2000 here in New York. And when that happened on stage, I had no reaction. I just thought it was kind of a silly gimmick that fell flat.
But the spin room did.
The next day, the world exploded, and it became this huge sexist issue. And I was thinking, I didn't really see it that way, but that's the narrative if we remember anything from Rick Lazio.
It made me uncomfortable watching it.
That's interesting. We had a totally different reaction. Your reaction turned out to be the reaction.
I have a question for you. Do you think also that Hillary Clinton needs to be a little careful looking too much like the victim because of some of the strong women who are around your father, like Kellyanne Conway, your sister Ivanka?
Listen, I don't think so. First of all, I think you're 100% right. I wish this didn't play into it, right? You're running for commander-in-chief of the United States. I wish we could just answer the questions. Right. I think I was a little put off last week, actually, by the criticism that Matt Lauer got, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton hadn't had a press conference in 275 days. Going out on that commander-in-chief town hall was the first time that she had gotten to address the email scandal and the charity scandal and so many other scandals. The next day, it's, oh, Matt Lauer bullied me. He did bullied me. Well, he asked 3 questions about the emails, and he was considered a quote-unquote bully. That was a whole narrative from the leftist media, was that he was bullied, and I don't like that. I mean, what you're trying to do is you're trying to set that expectation. I hate this, which is, well, how are you going to, react because, you have a male and you have a female on the stage? You wish that didn't come into this. What I'd love to see is, I'd love to see them actually talk about, the topics, right? I mean, look at what was polled the highest in your poll, right? Syria, Iraq, Libya, right? 35% of people said that was their number one issue. I mean, we spent $6 trillion making a total mess of the Middle East. We lost thousands and thousands of troops, and this was all under her watch. Her State Department lost $6 billion. It just vanished in midair.
So you'll be there, right?
Why don't we talk about these issues?
The whole family going in for it?
Yeah, we'll be there. I'm going to be eating popcorn with
Parmesan.
Right. Parmesan, baby.
Hillary Clinton trying hard, really hard, to get more love from younger voters, even submitting to some pretty biting satire in a Funny or Die skit. What can she do to woo as many millennials as President Obama did as a candidate?
Hillary Clinton having a tough time firing up support from millennials, those voters who are under the age of 25 who overwhelmingly supported President Obama. She is now stepping up her efforts, appearing on the web comedy Between Two Ferns. Clinton took some shots at Donald Trump and also submitted to some mockery from the host. Watch this.
What happens if you become pregnant? Are we going to be stuck with Tim Kaine for 9 months? How does this work?
I could send you some pamphlets to help you understand.
Are you down with TPP?
I'm not down with TPP.
No, you're supposed to say, yeah, you know me. Like the hip-hop group.
Don't tell me what to say.
Any regrets over losing the Scott Baio vote?
Not a one.
It wasn't heartbreaking that...
No.
Yeah, but Chachi. What's the best way to reach you? Email?
I don't even know what to make of most of that. In the meantime, Donald Trump is gaining a big edge on social media despite the Clinton campaign's large web team. Trump has nearly 12 million followers on Twitter compared to Clinton's nearly 9 million. On Facebook, Trump has nearly 11 million likes compared to Clinton's 6 million plus. By the way, millennials are 35 and under. I need glasses to read the prompter out here. How much weight
What did you say?
do you put in? I think I said 25. How much weight do you put in all the social media? Because you saw us at the break. We're all over it. We're reading it. We're looking at it. Sometimes I wonder if we read too
We're
much
texting each other on the couch.
How much weight do you put in all that?
Listen, a lot, right? I mean,
Really?
millennials take a lot of millennials, first of all, they don't have a house phone. Right? They don't. I mean,
we don't either.
They don't have a TV, right? I mean, most of their stuff comes off of YouTube and programming and off their phone. I mean, it's just very, very different. But what's relatable about Hillary Clinton to millennials? She's been a politician longer than all of them have been alive. I mean, she's been a politician longer than I've been alive. Think about that, right?
What's relatable about your dad, though, to millennials?
Well, I think he's a guy who's been an entrepreneurial guy. He's built an amazing company. He's become the epitome of the American dream. He's gone from just about nothing into, a man who just,
Nothing. He got $1 million. Wait, come on.
Listen, he's built an unbelievable empire. He's epitomized what America's all about: opportunity and working hard and being able to achieve your dreams and what you want to succeed. Right? It's no different than a Zuckerberg, right? Who went out with a great idea like a Facebook and developed this idea and built it and grew it and grew it and grew it. That's achieving something, right? And I think it's very different than a person who's been a career politician. And I also don't think, in fairness, I don't think millennials relate to policy very well because they haven't lived their lives long enough to understand so many of the issues that influence, meaning the broad stroke of issues, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they obviously understand a lot of issues as it pertains to them, student debt and this and that, but I think maybe taxes and things might be a little bit less significant and other issues. And so I just think there's a disconnect between somebody who's constantly talking about, policy and this and that, and then a man who's built a great company.
Millennials care about fluff over substance. I mean, I don't think
that's not true at all. Millennials care a lot about the economy. Something I agree. Eric, you and your father talk a lot about, and it's the economy. It's a lot of millennials. I mean, millennials aren't necessarily 16, 17, 18 years old anymore. Some of them are at the younger end, 18, 19, 20, but many of them moved into their early 30s and they're buying homes and they're buying cars for the first time, having children, and particularly many of them are still looking for work and saddled in college debt. So don't rule out the economy as number one. That being said, don't rule out your presence on social media, your sister's presence, your brother's presence. With just your team, you have a reach of over 30 million on social media. That's got to be doing something.
Also, guys, we're humans. We're humans that are speaking to that social media platform, right? I mean, Hillary has about 100 people who work on our social media team. Right. Father's got himself. I've got myself. I do all my social. I was tweeting as I was walking into the room today, right? I mean, I think that's very, very relevant.
But
also, look at 100%, right? I mean, it's the difference between a robot speaking and a person speaking, right? And I think that's very, very transparent. If you have to put H after a tweet, you're not really communicating to somebody.
But I think here's
and I want to touch on just that human factor that you're talking about too. It's being genuine. It's authenticity. I watched the entire Between Two Ferns, and I'm actually one of his fans. I like Zach. I think he's very funny. He didn't have a lot to work with, and if you watch it on a regular basis, he depends on the person having that line, which is why he said, "No, that's not what you were supposed to say." He depends on people being hip enough to understand the context of the humor. So he just simply was lacking in that. And even though we edited it, much of it looked like that. She did not look comfortable.
Yeah. I think she was prepped for a lot of it too. I mean, some of her jokes were funny.
Well, she didn't act like
she came up with it. Well, but some, I don't know.
You know, I think the thing about social media that's really relevant here, though, is I'm not a supporter of your father, but I follow him on social media because he says incendiary things. She doesn't, and I think that's part of he's entertaining, and that's part of the reason. Whether that translates to commander-in-chief, that's a different story.
Did you say you don't follow Hillary Clinton on Twitter?
I don't.
Wow. Yeah. All right.
President Obama getting to wield his veto pen, setting up a showdown between the administration and Congress over a bill allowing families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia. What it means for the president's legacy and the battle for the White House.
So will he or won't he? That's the question, as President Obama has until midnight to veto legislation allowing families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia over its alleged ties to the terrorists who carried out the attacks. But the attorney representing the family says he's confident Congress will do the right thing.
Well, the 9/11 families are incredibly distressed that he would veto this. And by the way, all of these arguments put forth by the judge and his colleagues, put forth by the administration, put forth by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, these are arguments that have been put out there for 6.5 years. I am absolutely confident it will be overridden overwhelmingly.
In the meantime, former Attorney General Michael Mukasey says a congressional override sets a dangerous precedent as the U.S. has so many officials and military overseas, and this could set up our government for retaliation. Where do you see this going, Eric Trump?
Listen, I take a very different approach. I take an emotional approach to this one. You know, we all lost friends in 9/11. One of my best friends' brothers died in 9/11, and you know, we all remember the scenes of people jumping out windows. We remember the scenes of, you know, those buildings coming down. And the reality is 15 of the 19 terrorists that day, hijackers that day, were from Saudi Arabia. I mean, this is not a secret to anybody. And we have a lot of people who are still grieving and mourning, and it's very, very tough. And I don't know, like I don't have much empathy, I think, for Saudi personally, because of that, because it's emotional to all of us who have lived in the city, who saw this, you know, firsthand. But it's a tough thing.
Is this a big gamble for President Obama? Here he is, the final months of his term.
I don't think it's a big gamble, but, you know, we talked about this on the couch the other day. I'm incredibly critical of the following. There are still pages that are redacted from public view of what Saudi Arabia's role was in 9/11. Yeah. And that's unconscionable for all the reasons Eric just cited. There are people who lost their loved ones. The country suffered as a whole. We deserve to know what our ally, and I put that in quotation, Saudi Arabia, did officially and what their role may or may not have been. After we know the truth, I can determine whether it's appropriate for anybody to sue Saudi Arabia. But right now, I would love for the people who want to bring this lawsuit to have all the facts before them so they can make an informed decision as to whether there's a basis, they believe there's a basis to sue. We're all entitled to know exactly what the Saudi role was. It's now been 15 years. It's time.
You know, with regard to the emotional side, I've read about both of these, and I see where you're coming from. And so then the question becomes, why not let this go forth, let this bill pass, and see where we get? Because the argument back has been, well, everybody else and all around the world are going to sue us for drones, everything else. Maybe not. Yeah. But is it worth, because of what those families have been through, taking that chance? I don't know. What do you think?
No, listen, I think I agree with you. I think you do, and I think that's why you have a rule of law, right? If it's nonsense, if there's nothing there, it won't go anywhere, right? If there is something there, then, hey, these families deserve justice for what happened. And quite frankly, I would want to know at that point why we covered up if there was something there, and I'd want to know what actually happened. I mean, I think that's very, very much
the
to your
whole couch
point,
agreed on something. Let's
there we go.
And we want to
save
time for
Julie.
some
There you go.
baby. Coming up, our hashtag One Lucky Guy, Eric Trump, gives us an inside look at some of the most memorable moments from his father's campaign.
Really?
Road trip, anyone?
Oh, I love it.
So much has happened since Donald Trump launched his presidential campaign. That's putting it lightly. Our hashtag One Lucky Guy is Eric Trump. He's here to give us now a behind-the-scenes look. Here's Mr. Trump greeting people at Geno's Steaks in Philadelphia. Give us the backstory.
Well, that was yesterday. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe. It feels like a year ago, but that was yesterday. We were in Philadelphia. We were in Pittsburgh first, and we went to Philadelphia, and hey, we like to eat, right? So we went to Geno's. We had a great time. It was funny. We walked in, and one of the guys behind the counter had a "Make America Great" sticker on his thermos that he had back there, and he just puts it up on the window. And so we have a lot of supporters
the whole
there.
Thing? The whole entire cheese sub?
You can ask me that quite really? Of course. Of course I ate the whole thing.
I think they call it hoagies down there.
What's your dad's menu favorite?
Oh, God. He loves cheeseburgers. We all love
cheeseburgers. Oh, my gosh. That's so funny.
It's kind of hard to beat a good American cheeseburger, right?
All right. So this next picture involves Fox Report and yours truly. And this was the most tweeted thing I've ever been involved in. And I thought I had done something wrong. I didn't know what it was because I didn't get to read it. Somebody just said, look at your phone.
How funny. That was you interviewing my wife.
Yes.
You guys were amazing, honestly. And that was me watching the interview in a restaurant, and literally somebody took a picture from over my shoulder, and so I thought it was a great little moment. It was fun. I was proud of her, and you guys were awesome together.
I thought it was like a gymnastics move selfie. I didn't know how that happened.
Who is that? Who are the two people on the TV?
All right, now we know. Okay, so check out this next picture of Eric waiting for his dad to accept the Republican nomination at the RNC. What's going on?
Well, that was one of the great moments, I think, probably of my life. I remember when Don, Ivanka, and I threw him over the top over the 1237. He got the nominee, and there's a great picture. It was on every newspaper of us, hugging as a family, and Tiffany was there, and so that was amazing. And that was obviously when he came out to accept the nomination. That was a great Thursday night, and the place was going crazy, and it was just it was amazing. Ivanka had just spoken, and it was an amazing night. It's a night I'll never forget.
I have to say, that must be such an incredible feeling, partisanship aside, to see your father accepting a major party nomination. It's surreal, right?
Especially because we've never done this before, right? This is new territory for us.
And now that you've had a stint in politics, do you like it?
Next question.
I think it's amazing, and I've become a believer in a message, and I don't think I had as much of that before. I think I was much more cynical. Maybe I'm even more cynical now.
There you are, speaking at the convention. You look like you're loving it.
I believe in his message, and my father's an amazing man, and he'll do a great job, and there's no harder worker in the world, and I believe in what we're doing, and I'm proud to stand by his side.
It's not easy.
But could you ever see yourself doing it?
No. I retire from politics on November 8th at midnight. So,
Isn't your brother as exhausting as it looks? I mean, when I watch you guys, we'll be out here doing something, and then we'll be home over the weekend. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And you guys are still out there.